The night before the biggest contract signing of his career, Daniel Ortiz knelt beside his bed and couldn't pray. Not because he didn't know the words. He'd been praying since he was 6 years old, kneeling next to his grandmother in a small church with metal folding chairs and a piano that was always slightly out of tune. He knew the words better than almost anything else in his life. But that night, kneeling on the carpet of a hotel room 3 states away from home, the words wouldn't come. Because he knew what he was about to do in the morning. He was about to walk into a boardroom, shake the hand of a man named Russell Cole, and sign his name to a deal that would triple his income, put his name on the door of a company, and require him to do exactly one thing he had promised God he would never do again.
Lie.
Not a big lie. Not the kind that makes headlines. Just a small one, buried in a line item, dressed up in language that made it sound like aggressive accounting instead of what it actually was. Russell had made that clear over dinner 2 nights before, smiling the whole time, like he was doing Daniel a favor. "Everybody does it, Daniel," he'd said, swirling the ice in his glass. "This is just how the game is played at this level. You want to keep playing small forever, or you want to play for real?" Daniel had laughed along. He hadn't said no. And that was the part that scared him most. Not that he'd been asked to compromise, but that some part of him had already started building the justification. Already started rehearsing the sentence he would say to himself in the mirror the next morning. "It's just this once. It's just business. God understands pressure." What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't have known kneeling in that hotel room, was that in less than 18 hours, everything he thought he was building his life on would be tested at once. His career, his marriage, his faith, and a decision he'd need to make in front of the one person whose opinion of him mattered more than any contract ever could. This is a story of 2 altars. One where Daniel had spent his whole life bowing his head, and one that had been quietly built, board meeting by board meeting, promotion by promotion, without him ever noticing he was kneeling there too. Only one of them could survive the week that followed. To understand how Daniel Ortiz ended up kneeling on a hotel room floor unable to pray, you have to go back almost 15 years, to a much smaller room. Daniel grew up in a modest 3-bedroom house outside Tulsa, Oklahoma, raised by his mother and grandmother after his father left when he was 9. Money was tight. There were seasons where the lights almost got shut off, and one particularly hard winter where his grandmother sold her wedding ring to cover the heating bill. But there was one thing that never got cut from the budget, and that was church. Every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night Bible study, vacation Bible school every summer. Daniel's grandmother, a woman named Esperanza, who everyone in the congregation just called Sister Espy, believed with her whole chest that faithfulness in small things was the only path to faithfulness in big things. She used to tell him, "Mijo, the altar isn't just where you go on Sunday. The altar is wherever you decide what matters more than yourself." Daniel didn't fully understand what she meant until much later. He grew up sharp, good with numbers, good with people, the kind of kid who could talk his way into extra credit and out of trouble in the same conversation. He got a partial scholarship to a state university, studied finance, and by 26 he was working for a mid-sized investment firm in Dallas. By 34, he'd built a reputation as someone who was talented, likable, and this was the part people always mention first, honest. In an industry not always known for it, Daniel Ortiz had a reputation for being a straight shooter. Clients trusted him because he told them the truth even when the truth cost him a commission. He married a woman named Priya, a physical therapist with a steady, grounded faith of her own, and together they had 2 kids, a boy named Elijah and a girl named Ruth. They attended a mid-sized non-denominational church called Cornerstone Fellowship, where Daniel taught a Sunday morning class for men in their 30s and 40s. The irony of that fact would matter a great deal by the end of the story. For years, Daniel's life had a kind of quiet order to it. Work was work. Faith was faith. He didn't see them as competing for the same space. He saw them as 2 rooms in the same house, and he moved between them without much friction. That started to change about 8 months before the events in the hotel room. A larger firm, Holbrook Cole Partners, run by a magnetic, well-connected executive named Russell Cole, began courting Daniel aggressively. Russell had a reputation of his own, brilliant, ruthless, and extremely good at making people feel like they were the missing piece his organization had been waiting for. He offered Daniel a partner track position, a significant raise, and something Daniel hadn't expected to want as badly as he did: status. The kind of career validation that whispered, "You finally made it." Priya was cautious from the start. Not because she didn't trust Daniel, she trusted Daniel completely, but because something about Russell unsettled her the first time they met at a company dinner. "He talks like results are the only thing that matter," she told Daniel afterward. "Be careful what room that kind of thinking puts you in." Daniel brushed it off gently. He told her and himself that he could handle it, that his values weren't for sale, that he'd worked in rooms with difficult people before and always kept his integrity intact. What Daniel didn't fully register was that Russell wasn't just offering him a job. Russell was slowly, patiently, offering him a different altar, one built out of ambition, comparison, and the quiet, seductive lie that success and character could be separated when convenient and reunited later, once things were stable. By the time Daniel flew out for the final contract signing, he had already said yes to a dozen small things that, individually, seemed harmless. Staying quiet in a meeting when a number looked inflated. Letting a colleague take credit for work Daniel had actually done, because correcting it would have been political. Telling Priya he was handling it when really, he hadn't decided anything at all. He had noticed that he'd been walking toward a second altar, one step at a time, for months. He was about to find out how far that road had already taken him, and how loudly the world would demand he keep walking. The morning of the signing, Daniel walked into the Holbrook Cole boardroom on the 40th floor of a downtown high-rise, and Russell Cole was already there, standing at the window with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had never once lost an argument in his life. "Daniel," Russell said warmly, extending a hand. "Big day." "Big day," Daniel echoed, and immediately hated how easily the enthusiasm came out of his mouth. They sat. Russell's assistant slid a folder across the table, the final partnership agreement, along with a set of quarterly projection documents Daniel would be expected to sign off on as part of onboarding. Daniel had reviewed an earlier draft 2 weeks prior. This version was different. Subtly, deliberately different. Buried on page 14, under a line labeled Client Acquisition Cost, Q3 adjusted, was a number that didn't match anything Daniel had actually seen in the underlying data. It wasn't a rounding error. It was a number built to make the firm's growth look stronger than it was, ahead of a fundraising round that would bring in new investors who would be looking at exactly this document to decide how much money to commit. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. "This number here," he said carefully, tapping the page. "I want to make sure I'm reading it right. This doesn't match the raw client data from the June report." Russell didn't even blink. "It's adjusted," he said smoothly. "Everyone adjusts going into a raise. Investors expect adjusted numbers. That's just the language of the room, Daniel." "Adjusted usually means accounting for one-time costs," Daniel said. "This isn't that. This looks like the number was built backward from a target." Russell smiled, the same easy smile from dinner. "You're sharper than most of the guys I bring in, you know that? That's exactly why I want you at this table and not on the other side of it, asking these questions from outside." He leaned forward. "Look, nothing about this is illegal. It's aggressive, sure, but it's within the lines. You sign this, you're not lying to anyone. You're presenting the company in its best light. That's called being a professional." Daniel had heard versions of this argument before, dressed in different clothes. He knew, sitting there, that Russell wasn't asking him a financial question. He was asking him a spiritual one, even if Russell would never have used that word. "Which altar are you going to bow to this morning?" "I need a day," Daniel said finally. "I want to walk through the underlying data again before I sign anything with my name on it." For the first time, something shifted in Russell's expression. Not anger exactly, but a cooling. A recalculation. "The investors are flying in Thursday," he said. "This needs to be locked by end of day tomorrow. I brought you into this deal because I was told you were someone who could move fast and think big picture. Don't make me question that." "I can move fast," Daniel said. "I can't sign something I haven't verified." Russell studied him for a long moment, then closed the folder himself, a small, deliberate motion. "Take your day," he said, standing, ending the meeting on his terms rather than Daniel's. "But Daniel, think carefully about what kind of partner you want to be here. The kind who asks a lot of questions, or the kind who gets results. Because at this level, only one of those gets the corner office." Daniel left the building and sat in his rental car in the parking garage for almost 20 minutes before he could make himself start the engine. He called Priya. She picked up on the second ring, and just hearing her voice, steady, familiar, unimpressed by boardrooms and 40th floor views, made something in his chest loosen slightly. "How'd it go?" she asked. Daniel told her everything. The number, Russell's response, the deadline. Priya was quiet for a moment on the other end of the line. "Daniel," she said finally, gently but without hesitation, "you already know what this is. You wouldn't be calling me shaking if you didn't." "I know," he said. Priya, this is the deal. This is the one we've been working toward for years. If I walk away from this..." "If you walk away from that," she interrupted softly, "you keep something you can't get back if you sign it." Daniel sat with that in silence. Belle, if you were in Daniel's position, one signature away from the career you'd worked 15 years for, but the signature required you to compromise something you'd promised God you'd never touch again, what would you have done? Would you have signed it, told yourself it was just business this once? Or would you have walked away, knowing it might cost you everything you'd built? Drop your honest answer in the comments, not the answer you think sounds right, the one you'd actually give.